Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take your source materials, stack them up, and build a conversational shortcut to knowledge.
And today, we have quite a stack.
We really do. You've given us a deep look into one of the most transformative, wealthy, and, frankly, complicated institutions in the world.
We are diving into Stanford University.
Exactly. The history, the contradictions, and just the sheer scale of the place.
It's an absolute academic juggernaut. I mean, officially, it's the Leland Stanford Junior University, founded way back in 1885.
But to really understand its immense global influence, you can't just look at the rankings, can you?
No, not at all. We have to understand the foundational decisions, and especially those early crises that basically forced it to become this unique financial engine.
The engine that powers Silicon Valley.
The very same.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our sources detail an institution that, it began as this heart-wrenching memorial to a lost son.
Right.
It modeled itself after older Eastern liberal arts colleges, but then it morphed into the quintessential modern research powerhouse.
It really did.
So our mission today is to figure out how Stanford navigated those early financial disasters to become this R1 research giant, and I think most importantly, the modern template for technology transfer globally.
And that identity conflict, that blend of idealism and really hard commerce, it's actually captured perfectly in the institution's unofficial motto.
The one chosen by the founding president, David Starr Jordan.
Exactly. Die Luft der Freiheit weht.
The wind of freedom blows, in German, which is an incredibly evocative phrase. It suggests intellectual liberty, openness.
It does, but this is where the history gets complicated right away.
Immediately.
Our sources note that during World War I, when you have this intense anti-German sentiment running high in the U.S., that motto became a huge liability.
A political problem.
A huge one. And the university actually disavowed it for a time. They backed away from it.
Wow, so they just dropped their own motto.
They did. They faced political pressure, and they retreated from that German heritage. What's so fascinating is that they only officially adopted the phrase again in 2002.
Decades later.
Decades later. And that action, reclaiming it, that speaks to the confidence the institution had developed by then. It was, ready to reassert a founding ideal of intellectual freedom, regardless of its controversial past.
And when we talk about defining Stanford today, we just have to talk about its scale. Before we even dive into the history, let's just get a snapshot of how massive this operation is.
Well, let's start with the resources it commands, because they are truly staggering.
Okay.
Stanford's endowment, according to the 2025 figures, is valued at a massive $40.8 billion.
$40.8 billion.
Billion with a B. That places it firmly among the top 4 largest academic endowments in the United States. And this immense, stable financial cushion allows for aggressive, long-term, high-risk research that just isn't feasible for most other institutions.
And it's not just the money. It's the physical space that money controls.
Mm-hmm.
The campus footprint is colossal.
Oh, it's huge. 8,180 acres.
That makes it one of the largest university campuses in the entire nation. It sprawls across, various counties and municipalities within the San Francisco Peninsula.
It does. It's almost impossible to grasp the physical dominance they exert over the region. And that size is compounded by their institutional classification.
The R1 status.
Exactly. When we call Stanford an R1 research giant, we're using the Carnegie classification system. And that signifies the absolute highest level of research activity.
We'll get into the research spending later, I'm sure, but that classification is earned by their output, right?
100%. And their ambition extends into every sphere, including athletics. You mentioned they were modeled after progressive Eastern schools, but they certainly surpassed many in sheer athletic dominance.
They hold 136 NCAA team championships.
And to put that in context of overall institutional excellence, you have to look at the NICDA Directors' Cup.
Okay, so for you listening, the NASCDA Cup is awarded to the college with the most success across all men's and women's sports. It's not just about football or basketball.
Right. It measures comprehensive collegiate athletic excellence.
And Stanford won it for 25 consecutive years.
25. From 1994 all the way through 2019. That level of prolonged, comprehensive success across dozens of different sports it's essentially unprecedented in modern American collegiate history.
So that sets the stage for what we're exploring, an institution built on idealism and memorial.
Tested by crisis.
And transformed by unparalleled ambition and strategic industry. Let's dive into that history, because the initial vision was really rooted in loss.
It was. The foundation story is genuinely poignant. The university was established by Leland Stanford, who was a former California governor and a railroad magnate, and his wife Jane in 1885.
And it was a direct, heart-wrenching memorial to their only child, Leland Jr.
Exactly. He died of typhoid fever in Italy at the age of 15. The university officially opened in 1891 on the Stanford sprawling Palo Alto farm, which is why it's still often called the farm.
And that initial vision was incredibly forward-thinking, especially for the era. Our sources highlight they opened the doors as both coeducational and non-denominational.
That coeducational mandate was hugely progressive. They were consciously modeling the school after Cornell University in New York.
Right. Cornell was also a newer, successful institution that was non-sectarian and, importantly, inclusive of women from its earliest days.
That's why Stanford was so often nicknamed the Cornell of the West in its early years. They were importing a specific, successful, liberal, academic, and structural DNA.
And it was a real connection, wasn't it? I think many of Stanford's first faculty, including the first two presidents, actually came directly from Cornell.
They did. But while the academic structure was imported, the aesthetic was purely Californian. The founders were highly specific about the architectural mandates laid out in the grant.
They wanted a blend of the English university style, which you see in the sprawling quad structure, but with a local California identity.
Right. They specified that the building should reflect the mission and the environment, so they mandated these low, one-storied structures. The idea was to emulate the traditional old adobe houses of the region.
So incorporating those Spanish colonial revival elements.
Exactly. And the detail they went into is incredible. They dictated interior features, deep window seats, open fireplaces, and the use of the iconic dark red tile roofs. This established the beautiful, sprawling aesthetic that defines the campus today.
And to execute this vision, they hired a master.
They did. Frederick Law Olmsted, the same genius who designed Central Park and, fittingly, Cornell's campus as well.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. Because despite the grand vision, the massive land grant, and all this imported academic talent, the entire enterprise was immediately put into jeopardy.
Almost immediately. The first major crisis hit only 2 years after the opening, with the death of Leland Stanford in 1893.
And his vast estate, which held the university's endowment, was immediately frozen.
It was. It got embroiled in a massive federal lawsuit because of his railroad dealings. The university's entire financial future was suddenly completely uncertain.
So a complete financial collapse was a real possibility? What was the mechanism that saved them, since the endowment was all tied up?
It was the fierce determination and, really, the financial maneuvering of Jane Stanford. She took control of the trustees, and she insisted that the university remain open throughout the crisis, which lasted for nearly a decade.
A decade, wow.
Yeah, she used her own personal funds, her jewelry, her ingenuity to keep the faculty paid and the lights on. Her resolve was absolutely crucial in protecting the institution during that prolonged financial fight.
And just when they got through that, the environment itself wasn't finished testing them. Just over a decade later, 1906, the Great San Francisco earthquake.
The damage was catastrophic. The original sources detail how the campus was, essentially broken. The Memorial Church suffered severe damage, including the loss of its famous mosaics and its steeple. Many buildings partially collapsed.
The scale of that destruction really demonstrates the resilience required just to keep the lights on.
It does. While most of the main quad structures were eventually restored, the destruction was significant. 2 major planned structures, a new library and a gymnasium, were completely abandoned and demolished.
And some of the original features of Memorial Church, they were never fully restored.
Right, like the original steeple. It was never rebuilt to its initial grandeur.
So early Stanford was defined by these near-death experiences: financial ruin and natural disaster. If you're running a university that has survived all that, your priority has to pivot from idealism to, structural permanence and stable income, right?
Precisely. Surviving those crises taught the administration that they needed stable, high-value professional programs to diversify their income and secure their national standing. This necessity drove the aggressive expansion of professional schools in the early 20th century.
Let's track that strategic expansion. It starts with medicine.
Yes, they recognized the need for a top-tier medical presence. So in 1908, the Stanford University School of Medicine was established through the acquisition of Cooper Medical College.
But it's noteworthy that even though it was established in 1908, it actually stayed in San Francisco until 1959.
It did. It was a massive logistical undertaking to move it to the main Stanford campus.
And at the same time, the legal studies program was being formalized.
Right. The law department started shifting into a full professional law school starting in 1908 and earned its American Bar Association accreditation in 1923.
And, of course, the business school.
The Stanford Graduate School of Business, or GSB, was founded in 1925. This was largely urged on by the then-trustee Herbert Hoover, who saw the need for formally trained modern executives in the increasingly industrialized West.
Hoover's presence is fascinating because he also established a major research center that focused less on immediate academic research and more on political and archival policy.
That's the Hoover Institution on War, Revolution, and Peace, founded in 1919. Initially, Hoover founded it specifically to preserve documentation and artifacts related to World War I.
It started as a historical archive.
Exactly, but it rapidly grew into a major public policy think tank, and eventually it established itself as a prominent center for conservative and libertarian thought, exercising profound influence on national discourse.
So by the mid-century, Stanford had structurally prepared itself for national dominance.
Yeah.
It had survived financial ruin and laid the groundwork. But the specific catalyst that transformed it into the Western juggernaut and really changed the global economy, that was still to come.
That transition from regional resilience to global dominance happened rapidly, and it was largely under the watch of Wallace Stirling, who was president from 1949 to 1968.
His presidency is the hinge moment.
It absolutely is. He transformed Stanford from that financially wobbly regional university into an internationally recognized academic powerhouse. That's when it earned the moniker the Harvard of the West.
And his strategy was, well, it was brilliant, but also necessarily pragmatic. He knew that to compete with the Harvards and the Yales, Stanford needed two things.
Right. Massive non-traditional research funding and a stable, independent financial base that didn't just rely on Jane Stanford's past heroics.
And he achieved the research funding by aggressively pursuing government defense contracts, especially in the post-war and early Cold War era.
He did. Our sources credit this directly with Stanford's swift rise to top 10 university status in the 1960s. The U.S. government needed R&D capacity, and Stanford, with its vast land and growing engineering talent, became a national security asset.
But the truly revolutionary part, the part that addresses the historical financial instability, was the monetization of their largest asset.
The land.
That 8,180 acres of massive untaxed land.
Absolutely. Stirling stabilized the university's finances by establishing the Stanford Industrial Park, now the Stanford Research Park, and the Stanford Shopping Center.
And the crucial point here is the mechanism. These were established on leased university land.
Exactly. Stanford retained ownership of that incredibly valuable real estate and simply leased it out on long-term contracts.
I see the genius in that. It created a reliable, perpetual stream of revenue that was totally independent of fluctuating stock markets or alumni donations. It freed them.
It freed them from reliance on traditional endowment payouts, which had proven to be so volatile. And that financial stability was the foundation that allowed for all the aggressive, long-term, high-risk academic research that followed.
It also allowed Stirling to dramatically increase the faculty size, expand the student body,
and launch the PACE fundraising program, which was the largest ever undertaken by any university up to that time. He also significantly increased financial aid, moving from less than 5% of students receiving aid when he started to more than a third when he retired.
So that sets the financial stage. But the actual culture of entrepreneurial risk-taking, of turning academic concepts into commercial products, that was cultivated directly by an engineering professor.
Frederick Terman. He is absolutely key here. He was both an engineering professor and, critically, the provost. And his vision was radical.
What was it?
He explicitly encouraged his engineering graduates not to head east to work for established corporate research labs, but to stay local, found their own companies, and rapidly commercialize their innovations.
That was a massive cultural shift.
Yeah.
It fundamentally changed the relationship between academia and commerce from passive knowledge transfer to active, localized commercialization.
It was revolutionary. Terman essentially provided the intellectual infrastructure, and then Sterling provided the physical and financial infrastructure through the research park.
So graduates could just lease land right next to the university,
Yeah.
maintaining connections to the labs, the faculty, and the research contracts.
Exactly. And the moment where Terman's vision really becomes realized involves a Nobel laureate and a handful of disgruntled employees.
The semiconductor connection.
Yes. William Shockley, Nobel laureate and co-inventor of the silicon transistor, joined Stanford as a professor and founded Shockley Semiconductor Laboratory in Palo Alto. This was the foundational seed of the entire industry.
But the real inflection point, the one that defines the modern valley, was the famous revolt.
The traitorous eight. Exactly. 8 of Shockley's brilliant employees, frustrated with his management style, famously resigned together to form the competing Fairchild Semiconductor.
And this event created a dense, self-sustaining ecosystem. When Fairchild employees started spinning off their own rival firms, it established that culture of rapid innovation, high labor mobility, and entrepreneurial turnover that defines Silicon Valley today.
And because the key ingredient in those transistors was silicon, the region became forever named Silicon Valley. Both Terman and Shockley are often correctly described as the fathers of Silicon Valley for sparking this entire culture.
Now, as transformative as that innovation history is, we have to acknowledge the complex and, frankly, painful academic, financial, and ethical scrutiny that accompanied Stanford's rapid ascent. The rise to prominence was not without significant institutional failure.
No, it wasn't.
The sources highlight a really serious and specific history of discrimination. So they model themselves after the liberal Cornell, they mandate coeducation, and then only 60 years later, they're intentionally restricting Jewish students.
Yeah.
How did that ideological shift happen so fast?
It's a profound contradiction. The sources reveal that during the 1950s, while simultaneously building its post-war reputation, Stanford intentionally restricted Jewish admissions through application reviews and quotas.
And the ideological shift just happened due to a mix of institutional complacency and a desire to align with the perceived social norms of the era.
That seems to be the case. And worse, the institution denied and dismissed these claims for decades, often claiming ignorance or that records were lost.
It wasn't until 2022 that an internal task force conducted a deep investigation and confirmed the systematic, deliberate discrimination.
Right. And that failure led to a formal institutional apology to the Jewish community, acknowledging the long-held institutional bias.
And the ethical scrutiny also extended deeply into the research side. We have to mention the notorious 1971 Stanford prison experiment.
Ah, the Zimbardo experiment, which involved assigning roles of guards and prisoners to student volunteers. It was widely criticized almost immediately as unethical for the psychological harm inflicted on participants.
And for the alleged manipulation of the experimental conditions. It serves as a reminder that institutional ambition can sometimes override ethical boundaries in research.
It does. And finally, you have the financial accountability crisis that hit the administrative level in the late 1980s.
The misuse of government funds.
Yes, it was a massive institutional scandal. It involved improper charges to federal grants, things like charging the government for flower arrangements or presidential home maintenance.
And this resulted in severe penalties for the school's research funding and led directly to the resignation of President Donald Kennedy in 1992.
So that combination of simultaneous world-changing innovation and profound institutional, ethical, and financial failure is, it's essentially the Stanford story in microcosm, an institution that struggled deeply with accountability while pioneering global technology.
Let's pivot to the physical reality of the university, because the sheer size of the campus impacts everything about the culture and environment.
The physical campus is overwhelming. At 8,180 acres, it is one of the largest in the U.S. And crucially, Stanford remains the largest single landowner in Silicon Valley. This land grant is the foundational element of its wealth and identity.
And that land ownership leads to administrative and zoning complexity that few other universities face. It's not just one big, neat parcel.
No, not at all. The main campus core is designated as a census-designated place, meaning it sits within unincorporated Santa Clara County, but Stanford's land holdings sprawl into neighboring municipalities.
All right, so portions of the land, like the Stanford Shopping Center and the Research Park, are located within the city limits of Palo Alto. Stanford has to negotiate with multiple jurisdictions.
It does, and it stretches even further, incorporating land in unincorporated San Mateo County and even parts of Menlo Park, Woodside, and Portola Valley. What is truly astonishing is that as of 2008, 60% of that massive land grant remained undeveloped.
60%.
That undeveloped portion preserves significant natural resources, which are essential research sites in their own right. For instance, the seasonal Lake Lagunita, which is technically an irrigation reservoir.
That lake is famous for being chronically dry, but it's vital because it's home to the vulnerable California tiger salamander.
And we had that moment of dramatic natural replenishment. Following the heavy rains of early 2023, the lake refilled to an impressive 8 feet of depth, temporarily restoring a major campus ecological feature.
And beyond the core campus, the research needs necessitated creating these scientific extensions with their own immense geographic footprints.
The sheer scale of Stanford's physics and engineering work required it. West of the main campus, you have the SLAC National Accelerator Laboratory, which is operated for the Department of Energy.
And this facility contains the world's longest linear particle accelerator, stretching a mind-boggling 2 miles long.
2 miles, dedicated to smashing subatomic particles, run by a university, but operated for the U.S. government.
And for biology and ecology, they have Jasper Ridge.
The Jasper Ridge Biological Preserve, a 1,200-acre natural reserve used specifically for wildlife biology and environmental research, where students and faculty conduct long-term ecological studies.
And then there's the specialized research, completely off-site, away from the founding grant.
That's the Hopkins Marine Station, located hundreds of miles south in Pacific Grove, California, on the Monterey Bay. It's one of the oldest marine laboratories on the U.S. Pacific coast, owned by Stanford since 1892, providing essential access to oceanographic research.
Let's look at the residential geography, because this is where that unique land ownership model comes back into play, specifically with the faculty housing.
Ah, yes, the area known informally as the faculty ghetto. Many faculty live here, on land owned by Stanford. The houses themselves are owned by the faculty, but the land underneath is leased from the university, often on 51-year terms.
Okay, so for you listening, that means they own the house, but they're perpetual tenants on the land beneath it.
Exactly. And this unique lease structure is Stanford's way of ensuring retention. By leasing the land, they remove the houses from the insane volatility and skyrocketing prices of the surrounding Silicon Valley real estate market.
So the home values still appreciate and depreciate, but not nearly as fast as if the faculty owned the land free and clear. It's a critical perk.
A huge one, designed to allow professors to afford to live in the valley without being financially priced out, which is a massive challenge for any high-cost academic institution.
And for the students, housing is highly concentrated around the main academic core.
Right. 89% of undergraduates live on campus, and Stanford guarantees housing for all 4 years, which is a significant commitment given the size of the student body.
And the housing options themselves reflect this deep commitment to diverse cultural experiences through themed houses.
You see this in places like Slaviansky Dom, which focuses on Slavic and East European culture, or Casa Zapata, which is a major hub for Chicano and Latino themes, often hosting important speakers and artists.
And then there are the co-ops, or self-ops, which embody a different kind of residential life.
These are cooperative living arrangements where residents actively contribute work, cooking, cleaning, maintenance to keep the house running. Places like the Enchanted Broccoli Forest or Synergy House provide an intentional counterpoint to the high-pressure academic environment.
Now to the visual identity of the campus, the landmarks that reinforce this unique aesthetic blend of Mediterranean and academic rigor.
The main quad, of course, is the heart of the university, anchored by the iconic Memorial Church, but Hoover Tower is probably the most recognizable structure on the skyline.
At 285 feet, Hoover Tower stands tall, inspired by the Cathedral Tower at Salamanca in Spain, and houses the Hoover Institution archives.
Other key landmarks include the Green Library, and visible from the surrounding foothills, the Dish. That's the 150-foot radio telescope, which is now part of a popular jogging and walking trail.
And for students, one of the central hubs is the White Memorial Fountain, affectionately known as the Claw.
The Claw is central to one of the most famous Stanford student customs, fountain hopping. Students celebrate this tradition by swimming or hopping into the university's 25 fountains, often after a major academic deadline or athletic win.
A collective release valve.
Totally. And that focus on culture extends deeply into the arts, particularly the globally significant collection at the Cantor Center for Visual Arts,
Which was established by the Stanfords as a memorial to their son.
And it holds one of the largest collections of works by Auguste Rodin in the world, numbering as many as 200 sculptures.
The famous bronze cast of the Thinker is a key feature and has essentially become part of the university's iconography, appearing on everything from campus publications to logos.
This commitment to culture is reinforced by the active student art scene, supporting everything from the Stanford Taiko drumming group and the symphony orchestra to highly regarded theater groups.
And we can't forget the a cappella tradition. There are 10 groups, including the Mendicants, Talisman, and Ragapella, which specializes in combining classical Indian music with Western pop.
It just demonstrates that blend of intense academic focus and a unique, deep cultural life.
All right, now we shift gears to look at the complex machinery running this entire operation. This is where we examine the governance model, the staggering financial mechanics, and the academic profile that maintains its elite status.
Stanford is structured as a corporate trust, managed by a privately appointed board of trustees with a maximum membership of 38 members.
And governance as a corporate trust means they operate with immense autonomy, overseeing the entire financial and academic enterprise.
Exactly. The board appoints the president and the provost. They are highly accountable to themselves, overseeing this vast enterprise as an enduring business entity.
One of the most critical structural advantages Stanford benefits from, thanks to its founding documents, is its tax status within California.
It's a huge factor in their wealth accumulation. A special clause in the California Constitution explicitly exempts university property from taxation, provided that property is used for educational purposes.
So that untaxed status on its massive real estate holdings dramatically reduces operating costs and allows for more aggressive reinvestment.
It does. And back to that staggering financial scale. The $40.8 billion endowment isn't just a reserve, it's an active economic engine.
Also,
The payout from that endowment covered approximately 22% of university expenses in the last fiscal year. But what truly sets Stanford apart is how that wealth pipeline is sustained through technology transfer.
this is the revolutionary part, isn't it? The model created a closed-loop system of wealth generation that relies on successful alumni.
Absolutely. Stanford pioneered the model of intellectual property and technology transfer. The institution actively helped commercialize research, and when those alumni-led companies succeeded, they created a unique pipeline of megadonors who felt immense loyalty and gratitude.
The donor list reads like a history of modern innovation. Phil Knight of Nike, Hewlett and Packard of HP, and more recently, the co-founders of Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin.
And that continues through founders of Netscape, SAP SE, and prominent venture capital figures. This pipeline ensures perpetual financial leadership in technology, allowing Stanford to maintain its elite academic profile despite the high cost of operating in the Valley.
Speaking of academics, the reputation is hard-earned. The admission statistics consistently place Stanford in the category of most selective universities in the world.
The acceptance rate hovers relentlessly around 4%. The student body they accept is defined by exceptional academic metrics, with admitted students typically reporting SAT scores in the 1440 to 1570 range.
However, admissions officers rank non-academic materials like extracurriculars, talent, and personal qualities as very important in the decision-making process.
They are looking for intellectual risk takers who align with the entrepreneurial culture, not just test scores.
And despite the immense wealth, the university maintains a powerful commitment to accessibility. For U.S. citizens and permanent residents, they operate on a need-blind admissions policy.
Meaning, a student's ability to pay does not factor into the decision. And the financial aid packages themselves are incredibly generous, backed by that massive endowment.
They have a no-loan policy, replacing all required loans with grants.
And the commitment is deep. Tuition, room, and board are waived for most families with incomes below $65,000. For families earning up to $125,000, tuition is typically waived entirely.
This commitment acts as a critical counterbalance to the perception that Stanford is only a school for the wealthy elite. They actively ensure that economic background does not prevent a highly qualified student from attending.
And at the graduate level, the dominance is even clearer. The Graduate School of Business and the Law School are consistently ranked #1 or among the top 2 most selective programs globally.
And overall, Reuters recognized Stanford as the world's most innovative university for 5 consecutive years through 2019, cementing its status as a global superbrand.
That reputation for innovation brings us directly to the legacy itself. We've discussed the culture, but let's dive into the monumental scientific and technical discoveries that have shaped our world.
Stanford is classified as an R1 doctoral university, meaning it achieves the absolute highest classification for research activity with expenditures of $1.82 billion in 2021-22.
And this enormous funding yields extraordinary results. Starting in the natural sciences, we have Arthur Kornberg's work on the biological synthesis of DNA, for which he won the 1959 Nobel Prize.
And perhaps even more fundamental to the world we live in today, the creation of the first transgenic organism.
By Stanley Cohen and Herbert Boyer. This was the fundamental discovery for genetic engineering, the ability to manipulate and recombine DNA across species, leading directly to products like human growth hormone and the hepatitis B vaccine. They essentially laid the blueprint for the entire biotechnology industry.
And other impactful breakthroughs include Felix Bloch's work, which is the underlying principle of MRI technology, and Arthur Leonard Shallow's work on lasers.
Moving into the computer and applied sciences, Stanford wasn't just a beneficiary of the digital age, it was the birthplace of its architecture. The Stanford Research Institute was home to one of the 4 original nodes of ARPANET.
The precursor to the internet.
Yes. And Vint Cerf, who led the research group there, elaborated the design of the Transmission Control Protocol, or TCP/IP.
Which is the bedrock of global digital communication. If you are listening to this right now, you are using the architectural basis that was formalized at Stanford.
It's an impossibility to overstate that single contribution.
And of course, the origin story we often forget about right there on campus. Google began in 1996 as a research project by 2 PhD students, Larry Page and Sergey Brin.
They were working specifically on the Stanford Digital Library Project, which was attempting to tackle the problem of organizing vast amounts of digital information. It led directly to the PageRank algorithm.
It's an amazing historical echo. The 2 founders of one of the world's largest companies met and built their prototype within the university's walls.
And the hardware side is just as important. We have the Klystron tube, invented by the Varian brothers right there at Stanford. It was absolutely crucial for the Allied radar effort during World War II.
So it established Stanford's engineering department as a national security asset long before Silicon Valley was a household name.
Right. And post-war, the innovation continued in computing architecture. The RISC microprocessor design project led to the successful commercialization of the MIPS architecture.
And even the very naming of a computing giant comes from the campus. Andy Bechtolsheim designed the Samwin workstation for the Stanford University Network Project.
Which, of course, led to the founding of Sun Microsystems in 1982.
And more recently, the invention of MIMO radio communications by Arojaswamy Palraj and Thomas Kailath in 1992.
This system is the essential technology underpinning modern Wi-Fi, 4G, and 5G wireless standards.
So the bottom line here is the entrepreneurial powerhouse Stanford became by pioneering this technology transfer model.
Stanford's Office of Technology Licensing is recognized globally as the gold standard for commercializing university research and intellectual property. It actively fosters what the sources call a strong venture culture.
And the resulting economic impact is just difficult to comprehend. Companies founded by Stanford alumni generate over $2.7 trillion in annual revenue.
That collective economic output would constitute the 10th largest economy in the entire world, generating approximately 5.4 million jobs since the 1930s.
That output hinges on a truly spectacular lineage of alumni startups, covering every modern technological age. Hewlett-Packard, Sun Microsystems, Cisco, NVIDIA, Yahoo, Netflix, Google, PayPal.
And into the social media era with LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and Snapchat. That lineage is virtually unparalleled. It's a truly spectacular innovation story.
It is. Now let's wrap up the campus experience by looking at student life, the culture, and the complex issues that exist within this elite environment.
Well, the culture is defined in part by its quirky athletics identity. The team name is the Cardinal, referring specifically to the color, not the bird, as they have no official mascot.
Right, because the original mascot, the Indian, was formally dropped by President Richard Langan in 1972 after a long period of objections from Native American students.
And in the absence of an official mascot, the job has been taken up by the Stanford tree, which is the band's mascot.
Which regularly appears on lists of America's most bizarre and controversial college mascots. It's truly unique.
It is. And the competitive spirit focuses heavily on the big game, the annual rivalry against UC Berkeley. This is one of the oldest college rivalries in the country, fought for the trophy known as the Stanford Axe.
And the Axe has its own storied history of theft and recovery attempts by both schools, dating back to 1899.
Student life is full of these eccentric, high-energy traditions designed to relieve the academic pressure.
Absolutely. We mentioned full moon on the quad, the large-scale kissing event at midnight. And then there's the unique annual Halloween party, the Mausoleum Party, held at the final resting place of the Stanfords.
Holding a massive annual bash at the final resting place of the founders, that's a unique, slightly macabre institutional tradition.
It speaks to a certain irreverence.
It is a 20-year tradition. We also noted fountain hopping, swimming in the 25 fountains, often starting at the Claw. And a newer tradition that captures the modern focus on values is the Stanford Marriage Pact, an annual matchmaking event based on a detailed questionnaire.
And in terms of student organizations, the entrepreneurial groups really stand out.
BASES, the Business Association of Stanford Entrepreneurial Students, has over 5,000 members. And StartX is a nonprofit startup accelerator specifically for student and faculty-led ventures.
Media-wise, they have the traditional, the Stanford Daily. But the independent, anonymous paper, the Fountain Hopper, is notable for being the one that first broke the Brock Turner story.
Which brings us to the difficult and complex issues of safety and misconduct that the campus has faced, particularly regarding sexual assault.
The 2015 Campus Climate Survey provided sobering statistics. 4.7% of female undergraduates reported experiencing sexual assault, and 32.9% reported experiencing sexual misconduct.
The issue was thrust into the national spotlight with the notorious 2015 case, People v. Turner. Chanel Miller was sexually assaulted by Brock Turner, a student athlete. The incident was witnessed by 2 Stanford graduate students who intervened and detained Turner until the police arrived.
And the subsequent 6-month jail sentence Turner received, despite prosecutors seeking 6 years, sparked massive public outrage. This public furor ultimately led to the presiding judge, who was also a Stanford graduate, being recalled by voters 2 years later.
It became a powerful moment in the national dialogue about justice and privilege.
There was also the complexity of the Joe Longsdale case from the same time period in 2015. Elise Clafferty, a former student he mentored, filed a lawsuit alleging sexual assault and harassment.
And in that situation, Lonsdale was initially banned from campus for 10 years by the university.
However, Stanford later rescinded that finding and the ban in late 2015, which led Clafferty to withdraw her civil suit.
These cases, taken together, highlight the persistent challenges the university faces in navigating power dynamics, institutional processes, and accountability, especially given the wealth and influence of those connected to Silicon Valley.
It provides a necessary grounding, reminding us that this concentration of intellectual talent and immense financial power creates complicated internal dynamics that require constant critical scrutiny. Finally, let's look at the sheer list of notable people who have walked those red-tiled quads.
The legacy of human achievement connected to Stanford is profound. Alumni include a U.S. President, Herbert Hoover, who was also a longtime trustee and founder of the Hoover Institution.
And the political reach is global, with alumni including current UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and former Japanese Prime Minister Yukio Hatoyama.
The judicial impact on the United States legal system is particularly striking, with several alumni holding seats on the U.S. Supreme Court. That roster includes the former Chief Justice William Rehnquist and Associate Justices Sandra Day O'Connor, Anthony Kennedy, and Stephen Breyer.
To have produced 4 Supreme Court justices who sat concurrently or consecutively speaks to the immense influence of Stanford law and its graduates on American legal thought.
And the faculty eminence is unmatched in certain critical fields. Current and former faculty include 58 Nobel laureates and a remarkable 29 Turing Award winners.
29. So the Turing Award, the so-called Nobel Prize in Computer Science, has been given to a Stanford affiliate 1/3 of all times it has ever been awarded.
That intellectual density is partly due to the environment Terman created, meaning that foundational geniuses like Vint Cerf were there, attracting the next generation of world-changing minds.
Other major academic and cultural figures affiliated with the campus include the psychologist Philip Zimbardo, the acclaimed author Tobias Wolff, and former U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice.
That brings us full circle from the humble memorial campus founded on a former farm in 1891 to a global power broker defined by its people and its groundbreaking inventions.
We've seen how the strategic, necessary financial decisions in the mid-century, led by Wallace Stirling's land monetization and Frederick Terman's vision, anchored the university to the explosive growth of the technology industry. This combination overcame early crises and created a unique feedback loop of wealth and innovation.
And if we synthesize this unique narrative, we realize that Stanford's immense wealth, that massive untaxed land endowment, is inseparable from its specific culture of entrepreneurial risk-taking and global dominance.
Which leads us to the final provocative thought we want to leave you with, something for you to mull over after this deep dive.
Go on.
Considering the institution's motto, Die Luft der Freiheit weht, the wind of freedom blows, and Stanford's unparalleled influence on modern technology, how much of the specific freedom that defines Silicon Valley culture, from rapid innovation to decentralized corporate structures and even the high tolerance for risk, is inherently tied not just to intellectual ideals, but to those initial specific decisions made by founders and early presidents to monetize its massive land holdings rather than relying solely on traditional, more restrictive endowments?
So the idea is this. The perceived intellectual freedom of Silicon Valley, the freedom to disrupt, the freedom to innovate, was perhaps only possible because of the very specific financial freedom that Stanford provided through its real estate ownership.
That 19th century decision regarding land created the economic engine that defines the 21st century world.
It's a powerful connection between dirt and destiny.
A profound thought on which to end this deep dive. Thank you for joining us as we unpack the layered history of Stanford University. We hope this gives you a new perspective on the engine of global innovation.
And we encourage you to keep asking those questions about the relationship between wealth, freedom, and institutional structure. Until next time.
Until next time.